The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. It's a line that feels like it could be written on a sticky note in some Silicon Valley boardroom.
Or spray painted on a CrossFit gym wall.
Exactly. But it's old. Really, really old.
Almost 2,000 years old. And the context is what makes it so powerful. I mean, this wasn't written by some guy sipping a latte in a comfortable cafe.
No.
This was written by a man in arguably the worst position imaginable, even though he was the most powerful man in the world.
We are talking about Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor.
Right. And you have to set the scene. He's in a tent on the front lines in Germania.
So in the middle of a war.
A war that just drags on forever. He's old. His health is failing. There's a plague just ravaging the empire. He's surrounded by death and betrayal. And in the middle of all that darkness, he sits down and writes a note to himself. The obstacle is the way.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are unpacking a book that takes that ancient idea and translates it for the modern world. We're talking about The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
And I'm really excited about this one because it's not a philosophy book in the, academic sense. We're not going to be debating the metaphysics of the soul.
No, this is a manual.
It's an operating system for when life punches you in the face.
Which happens to all of us.
Yeah.
And the premise here is pretty radical. Holiday argues that we shouldn't just survive our problems. We don't just grit our teeth and bear them.
Yeah, we should actually be grateful for them. They're the fuel.
It's the idea that the thing blocking your path is the path. The lawsuit, the injury, the terrible boss.
The technical failure. Those aren't distractions from your life. They're the raw materials you use to build your life.
That sounds great on a poster, but putting it into practice when you've just been fired? That's a whole different ball game. So how do we actually do this? The book breaks it down into a specific structure, doesn't it?
It does. It's a triad. 3 interdependent disciplines that you have to master to flip obstacles into advantages.
Okay, so that's perception, action, and will.
Perception, action, and will.
Let's map this out. So perception is how we see the problem. Action is what we do about it. And will is, well, how we endure it.
Essentially, yes. Will is the internal capacity to handle what you can't change. Let's start at the beginning.
Perception.
The discipline of the mind. And the core idea here is that events, in and of themselves, they're neutral. They have no meaning until we assign it to them.
Right, it's Shakespeare. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Exactly.
So if my car breaks down on the way to a big meeting, that's not objectively bad.
Objectively, no.
Okay.
It's just mechanics. An engine stopped working. It's a fact. The badness comes from you yelling, "This is a disaster. I'm going to lose the client. My career is over."
You're adding that layer of judgment.
That's the layer.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though. It's easy to say stay objective when we're just talking about it, but when you're in a crisis, your brain it's hardwired to panic. It's fight or flight. How do you override that?
You look at John D. Rockefeller,
The oil tycoon.
the richest man in modern history. But he didn't start that way. Go back to 1857. Rockefeller's just a kid. He's barely in his 20s. He's an ambitious, aspiring investor. And then the panic of 1857 hits.
And for context, this wasn't just a bad week on Wall Street.
Oh, this is a meltdown. Total chaos. Businesses failing, grain prices plummeting, banks closing. People were ruining their lives in a single afternoon because they were terrified.
Just acting purely on fear.
Purely on fear, selling at the bottom, making rash decisions.
So what does a 20-something Rockefeller do? I mean, does he just have nerves of steel?
It wasn't just that he was calm. He engaged with the samurai Miyamoto Musashi called the observing eye.
As opposed to the perceiving eye.
Exactly. The perceiving eye sees a terrifying crash that will ruin us all. The observing eye sees asset prices are dropping below their intrinsic value due to emotional selling.
So he saw it as a classroom?
He called it his baptism in the market. He watched how people lost money. He looked for the structural flaws that caused the crash. So while everyone else was running around like headless chickens, he was.
He was gathering data.
He was cold-blooded about it. He cultivated sang-froid coolness under pressure. And because he stripped away the emotion, he could see the opportunity.
He bought when everyone was selling.
And he started building his empire on the ruins of everyone else's panic.
The lesson there isn't just be brave. It's that if you can stay rational when everyone else is emotional, you have this massive strategic advantage.
It's a superpower. But it requires you to separate the story you tell yourself from the facts on the ground. And sometimes that separation is the only freedom you have left.
Which brings us to Reuben Hurricane Carter. Now, this story it's heavy. We're moving from a financial crisis to a life and death injustice.
It's one of the most powerful examples in the book. Carter was a top contender for the middleweight boxing title.
Right.
Famous, wealthy, at the peak of his powers. And then in the mid-60s, he's wrongly accused of a triple homicide.
And the system just railroaded him, tried, convicted, 3 life sentences. I can't even imagine the rage. You're innocent and everything is just taken.
Most people would be broken by that.
Yeah.
Or they'd become consumed by bitterness, which is its own kind of prison. But Carter did something that seems almost impossible. He arrives at the prison, and he's wearing this tailored, expensive suit.
In prison.
In prison, and a $5,000 diamond ring. And he stands in front of the warden and says, "I know you had nothing to do with the injustice that brought me here, so I am willing to stay, but I will not be treated like a prisoner."
That is bold. Didn't he refuse to wear the uniform?
He refused the uniform. He refused to eat the prison food. He wouldn't even touch the door handles. It wasn't just stubbornness. It was a psychological survival strategy.
He realized they could control his body, but not his mind.
Not unless he let them. It's that Marcus Aurelius line again. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed.
If he acted like a prisoner, he became one.
Precisely. So he acted like a free man who just happened to be in a cell. He spent those years studying law, philosophy, history. He worked on his own case. It took 19 years.
19 years.
But he walked out a free man. And more importantly, he walked out a better man. He didn't let the injustice rot his soul. He used the time to sharpen his mind. That is the ultimate discipline of perception.
It's reframing the whole narrative. I'm not a victim. I'm a student. I'm not a prisoner. I'm a lawyer in training.
And you can apply that to smaller things, too. The book mentions George Clooney.
Oh, right. His early days.
Yeah, before he was George Clooney, he was just another struggling actor, going to auditions, failing constantly. And he realized he was failing because of his perception. He saw the audition as him asking for a favor. Please like me, please hire me.
That tyranny of being picked. We've all felt that in job interviews. You feel small.
And it reeks of desperation. So Clooney flipped the script. He realized that casting is actually an obstacle for the producers. They have a problem.
Yeah.
They have a role to fill. They're behind schedule.
So he's not the beggar. He's the solution.
Exactly. He started walking in with the attitude of, I am the answer to your problem. I'm going to make your life easier. That shift in perception changed the energy in the room. He started booking roles immediately.
It's amazing how just changing the lens changes the result, but seeing the opening isn't enough, is it? You can have the best mindset in the world, but if you just sit on the couch, nothing happens.
Which brings us to the second pillar, the discipline of action.
Now, Holiday makes a distinction here. Action isn't just busyness. It's not flailing around in a panic.
No, panic is the enemy of action. We're talking about directed, creative, persistent movement. And often, it's about starting before you feel ready.
The Amelia Earhart story is the perfect example of this. We think of her as this icon, but in the 1920s, she was basically grounded.
She was stuck.
Yeah.
And then the phone rings. It's an opportunity. But it's insulting.
It's worse than insulting. They offer her a spot on the first transatlantic flight, but the conditions are, you won't fly the plane, 2 men will do that.
You're a chaperone.
You won't get paid.
And oh, by the way, it's incredibly dangerous and you might die.
I think 99% of people would have slammed the phone down. I'm a pilot, not a piece of luggage.
It's humiliating. But Earhart didn't care about her ego. She cared about the objective. She wanted to cross the Atlantic. So she swallowed her pride to get her foot in the door.
She said yes.
She said yes. She got on the plane, kept her mouth shut, observed, learned everything she could, and guess what? She became the first woman to cross the Atlantic by air. She became famous.
And less than 5 years later, she did it solo.
Because she didn't wait for the perfect offer. Her motto was, always think with your stick forward, meaning keep the plane moving. If you slow down, you stall. If you stall, you crash.
That's a great image. But sometimes the problem isn't getting started. It's that the task is just too big. It's overwhelming. You look at the mountain and you just freeze.
And this is where the process comes in. This is heavily influenced by Nick Saban, the legendary football coach.
Who is famous for never talking about winning.
It drives the media crazy. They ask him about the national championship, and he talks about practice drills. But his logic is sound. He tells his players, don't think about the trophy. Don't even think about the score of the game.
Because thinking about the score is a distraction.
It's focused on the future, which you can't control. It creates anxiety, Saban says. Focus on the drill. Focus on your footwork. Focus on this specific play, right here, right now.
It breaks the mountain down into rocks.
Exactly. Just do the next right thing. You don't have to carry the weight of the whole project. You just have to carry this one step.
I want to talk about one of my favorite stories in the book because it's just so cheeky. The Banana Man.
Samuel Zemery, a legend. So he's in South America trying to get his banana business off the ground.
Yeah.
He needs to get his product across a river to the port.
Simple enough. Build a bridge.
You'd think. But his competitor is United Fruit, this massive corporation. And they had bribed all the local government officials to pass a law specifically making it illegal for Zemery to build a bridge.
That's incredibly petty and effective.
Yeah.
Legally, he's checkmated.
A normal person hires a lawyer and fights it in court for 5 years. Zemery didn't have 5 years. The bananas would rot. So he looked at the obstacle. The law says I cannot build a bridge.
Okay.
So what is a bridge?
A structure connecting two sides.
So Zemery built 2 very long piers, one from the left bank, one from the right bank. They reached out into the river and stopped just a few feet apart.
I can see where this is going.
And then he built a temporary pontoon raft that floated in the middle to connect them.
So when the government officials showed up screaming,
He laughed in their faces. He said, "What bridge? That's no bridge. It's just a couple little old wharfs and a boat."
that is malicious compliance at its absolute finest.
It's hilarious, but it's also a profound lesson in action. Don't get hung up on how things should be done. Find the workaround. Be pragmatic.
Sometimes you have to go around the wall, or, as the book suggests with Alexander the Great, you use the obstacle against itself.
A flank attack. The story goes, Alexander was trying to tame this horse, Bucephalus. It was a monster. Everyone tried to break it with whips and force, and it just threw them off.
Brute force versus brute force.
Alexander stopped and watched. He realized the horse was terrified of its own shadow. So Alexander didn't use a whip. He gently turned the horse to face the sun.
The shadow disappears behind it.
The horse calmed down immediately. He used the horse's own psychology against it. He turned its fear into the solution.
Okay, so we've perceived clearly, we've acted creatively and pragmatically, we've done everything right. But sometimes it still doesn't work.
And this is the hard truth that a lot of self-help books skip. Sometimes you do everything right and you still lose. The market crashes and stays down. The illness is terminal.
And this brings us to the final discipline, the will.
The inner citadel.
I feel like we need to distinguish this from action. Action is about changing the world outside. Will is about what?
Will is about changing yourself. It's how you endure the things you cannot change. It's the final line of defense. When the walls of the city have fallen, you retreat to the inner citadel.
And the patron saint of this discipline has to be Abraham Lincoln.
Lincoln is such a tragic figure.
Yeah.
We see the tall hat and the statue, but the man suffered immensely. He grew up in dirt poverty. He lost his mother, lost the love of his life. He lost election after election.
The book talks about his battle with melancholy.
Today, we would call it clinical, crippling depression. There were times his friends actually removed razor blades from his room. But Holliday argues that this suffering was his training ground.
He learned how to endure.
Exactly. When the Civil War broke out, the entire nation was falling apart. But Lincoln, he had been in the darkness before. He knew the terrain. He had the fortitude to say, "This too shall pass," because he had lived it.
His personal pain created the container for the national pain.
He had built a will that was unbreakable. And you don't build that when things are going well. You build it in the fire.
One of the tools for building this, and this might sound a bit gloomy, is premeditatio malorum. Premeditation of evils.
Sounds like pessimism, right?
Yeah.
Hey, let's sit around and think about everything that could go wrong.
Yeah, who wants to do that?
But it's not about worrying. It's preparation. It's the pre-mortem. If you're launching a product, ask yourself, if this fails, why did it fail?
So you anticipate the blow before it lands?
If you visualize the betrayal or the failure, it loses its power to shock you. You don't freeze when it happens because you've already been there in your mind. You're ready.
And then there's the ultimate level of will. Not just enduring your fate, but loving it. Amor fati.
This is the graduate level course. To love your fate.
The Thomas Edison story here completely blew my mind. I actually had to look it up to make sure it was true.
It's incredible. Edison is 67 years old. He's an old man. And one night, his entire laboratory complex catches fire. We're talking massive chemical fires, flames shooting into the sky, his prototypes, his records, his life's work. It's all burning.
And his son finds him just standing there, watching. And he's not crying.
He tells his son, "Go get your mother and her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again."
That is insane.
And then he said, we've just got rid of a lot of rubbish.
That is amor fati. He accepted the event so completely that he could actually find the beauty in it. He didn't waste a single second wishing it hadn't happened.
Because it had happened. He went back to work the next day.
And generated millions in revenue the following year. He used the disaster as a blank slate. That's the power of will. It turns the worst thing that can happen into a new beginning.
But sometimes, will isn't about you at all. Sometimes the only way to survive is to stop thinking about yourself.
James Stockdale, a prisoner of war in Vietnam for over 7 years, tortured, solitary confinement. He realized that if he focused on his own survival, his own pain, he would break. So he focused on the other men.
Unity over self. He created a tap code so they could communicate through the walls. He took beatings to protect his men. By serving something bigger than himself, he found a strength a selfish man never would have.
So we have this cycle, and it really is a cycle.
It is. You perceive the obstacle clearly. You act with energy and creativity to overcome it. And if you fail, or if the obstacle is immovable, you use your will to endure it and grow from it.
And then
you start over. Because life is just one obstacle after another. Holiday says, Elysium is a myth. There's no point where you make it and all your problems disappear.
Which sounds depressing, but it's actually liberating. If you expect obstacles, you aren't surprised by them.
Exactly. You become an athlete of life. You stop asking for an easy life and start asking for a strong back.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one final thought from this deep dive. It's a Latin phrase, memento mori.
Remember, you are mortal.
The book talks about Montaigne, the French writer. He was flung from a horse and nearly died. And instead of being traumatized by it, it energized him.
It gave him urgency. We live like we have unlimited time. We procrastinate, we hold grudges, we worry about petty nonsense. But if you truly accept that you could die today, tomorrow, it clarifies everything.
It strips away the trivial.
It does. If you knew this was your last year, would you be worried about that rude email? Would you be afraid to launch that business? Probably not.
If we stop denying that life is finite and stop denying that it's full of obstacles, we might actually start living it.
The obstacle isn't something to be avoided. The obstacle is life. And if you're trying to avoid the obstacle, you're just avoiding life itself.
So the next time you hit a wall, the next time the deal falls through or the car breaks down, don't panic. Observe. Act. Endure.
The impediment to action advances action.
The obstacle is the way. Thanks for listening.